Hello and welcome to the Game Theory Podcast. I'm your host, Sam Vicini. We are presented by CLNS Media. Today on the show, we've got good friend of the program, Tony Jones from over at the Salt Lake Tribune. Tony is probably my favorite beat writer in the country. I'm sorry to everyone else who does great work around the country in the NBA. I think that there are so many that go, under the radar, like Fred Katz and the Norman Transcript and all of the other guys that I have on this show. But I think that Tony is my favorite because Tony covers the NBA in total. And we just had like a 10-minute conversation before the podcast talking about college basketball because the dude is just a junkie when it comes to basketball. Tony, how's it going, man?
Easy to be a junkie when you're in Milwaukee, Wisconsin for 72 hours.
So the Salt Lake Tribune realized that it would be cheaper to leave Tony in Milwaukee than to send him back to Utah and send him home and then send him all the way back out to Chicago for the next game. So Tony is stuck for the next 72 hours in Milwaukee in a hotel. So Tony has all the time in the world to podcast right now.
I have all the time in the world. A little podcasting, little NBA 2K, little reading, just the works. I've already FaceTimed my daughter like 4 times. She's told me to stop FaceTiming her. So yeah, we're here now.
Well, we're going to talk about, just to give the rundown at the top, we're going to talk about the Jahlil Okafor trade to start. Then we're going to talk about the team that Tony covers, the Utah Jazz and the Donovan Mitchell hysteria. Then we're going to talk about the Oklahoma City Thunder. And finally, because Tony is like just such an NBA draft junkie, much in the way that I am, we're going to kind of just finish it out with some of the guys who have impressed Tony this year. The podcast is presented by MyBookie and by DraftKings. So we'll give you a quick little rundown on the promo codes that you can use for those services midway through the show. But Tony, let's start with the Jahlil Okafor trade. So the deal is Jahlil Okafor. It is Nick Stauskas. It is a 2019 second-round pick that belongs to, I believe, the New York Knicks for Trevor Booker. So Okafor, Stauskas, and that second-round pick go to Brooklyn. Trevor Booker goes to Philadelphia. Whenever you saw this trade, what was your initial reaction to it?
Well, I think my initial reaction to it was that I'm surprised that Philly was able to get as much as they did. I mean, Trevor Booker might not seem like a sexy name, but he's really going to help that team.
I agree.
Because he's a lot more skilled than he used to be. He's very athletic. He's just a tremendous locker room presence. I mean, he's, people don't realize the value of having a locker room guy. Trevor Booker is going to be one of those guys that's still in the league at 38 years old because he's such a good guy in the locker room and he's such a positive influence. And so I think he's, a guy that's really going to help Philly, and he's going to really help Ben Simmons and Joel Embiid. He does a lot of dirty work. I mean, I think it was a really good return for Okafor, considering that they buried him on the bench and basically haven't played him all season. So, I think that was my first reaction. The second reaction, I actually thought that this is a really good landing spot for Okafor because here's the thing. I mean, I think that we both know that, the league has kind of moved on from Okafor's skill set. In terms of, he would have, if this were 20 years ago, he'd be a perfect guy for the league. He's basically Al Jefferson, in terms of being a back-to-the-basket guy, not really a pick-and-pop guy. It's not really going to stretch you out the three-point range. But the Nets, that's a good landing spot because they're one of the few teams that can really use that skill set. And he's going to get a lot of playing time there. He's going to get a chance to show what he can do. He's going to get a chance to play with D'Angelo Russell once he gets healthy, and I think that it was a good outcome for both parties, considering how difficult a spot that Okafor was in personally, and that Philly had kind of painted themselves in with their handling of Okafor on the floor.
Yeah, I 100% agree with you. That was my takeaway just from Jump Street, that this is a deal that makes so much sense for both sides. So I agreed with you as well that I was surprised that the Sixers got an actual piece for Okafor. So Trevor Booker, I mean, I think you saw it in the first game last night. This is being recorded on Sunday, and on Saturday night, Philadelphia played the Cleveland Cavaliers. They end up losing by 7. Big run from Cleveland, kind of in like the early fourth quarter. And Booker goes for 12 and 8. He played pretty solid defense, I would say. He's just not he's not going to be like a difference maker, but he's a really solid piece to have around, particularly if the Sixers want to try and rest Joel Embiid, such as they did in that game. So, if they want to try and, get Ben Simmons to have a night off, if they want to, let Dario Saric recover from this eye injury where he got like scraped in the eye or whatever. So, he's just a really good guy to have for all the reasons that Tony just said. You said that you actually talked to Booker on the record whenever the deal went down. What did Booker kind of say to you?
Yeah, I talked to him. So I sent him a text about maybe 5 minutes after the deal had gotten reported. He didn't get back to me until the next morning. And then when he did get back, then when we did talk, man, he was just like, "Hey, I was in Mexico City." He was taking his customary pregame nap when he was awakened and told to go down to the hotel lobby. Goes down to the hotel lobby, and that's when he was informed that he was traded. So he had to fly. He flew straight from Mexico City to Philadelphia to go and receive his physical so that the trade could be officially consummated. And then, so by the time I had talked to him, it was, around 12 hours after the trade, and he hadn't really slept. So, his first thing was like, hey, he's going to a playoff competitive team. And that he was happy with that, and he was happy that he had talked to the Philly front office, and they had told him what his role was going to be, and that he was going to play a lot, and so it was just one of those things. So it was a good talk. It was a good conversation. He was in really good spirits, and obviously getting traded is something that can be, shocking to your family because, you got to pick up and move. But the other thing with Trevor is he's going to be an unrestricted free agent at the end of the year. So, he's going to have to they're going to have to figure that part out as well. But it's definitely something that he's happy with. I think that he's happy to be in a position where he has a chance to play on a playoff contender.
Yeah, and this is a situation too where ultimately this gives Brett Brown a lot more options in terms of how he matches up with opposing teams. Like they have Amir Johnson. If they need to go for a defense-heavy approach, they can go Amir Johnson. Not to say that Booker's a bad defender, but Amir has turned himself into, over the course of the years, a really, really strong defender. If they want to go with bigger lineups, you can play something like Embiid, Booker, and Simmons together, like in similar ways to the way they play Dario Saric with that lineup. There are just a lot more options for Brett Brown at his disposal. Ultimately, though, I do think that Jahlil Okafor is probably the main asset here going forward, not to throw shit on Nick Stauskas, who I think can actually be a relatively decent player in that system. Kenny Atkinson's just going to give him the green light and say, go shoot. That's going to be great for Stauskas' confidence, I think. But, Okafor is the guy here that is just fascinating to me because this is a really great scheme for him because they're going to space the floor around him in a really competent way and allow him potentially to really succeed as a interior center who can score the basketball. If he can't succeed in Brooklyn with the way that they space the floor, especially once D'Angelo Russell comes back, it's difficult for me, or at least if he can't even put up numbers relatively efficiently, it's difficult for me to see a path to success for him because it's just such a good spot for him to go in low pressure and just try and get things going and with his career. So if he can't do that here, I'm, a little bit scared for the rest of where his career could go.
Well, that's the thing. I mean, I think that when everybody reconciled that, okay, hey, this is not working in Philly, they got to trade him. The next question was like, oh my goodness, to who? Like, that was the next question, because it's like, okay, they're just, this league is just going so far away from traditional back to the basket centers that, there was just only a few places that really made sense. Like, I thought Chicago made some sense. I thought Brooklyn made some sense, but I just thought that there were just so few places that really made sense, and Brooklyn was still the one place that really, 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 really made sense that he could just go there and he could play. It made so much sense. It makes so much sense that we can even overlook his lack of defense, because nobody from Brooklyn plays defense right now. So I thought it really he just really fits. So I think, he's in that system, 4 out, 1 in, he's going to have a chance to really put up numbers. I'm a little bit more nervous about Nick Stauskas and his fit there, because, there's so many guards there, and there's so many guys there that can shoot. You can always use shooters, but, Alan Crabb, Karis LeVert, Joe Harris has turned himself into a player. They have a lot of guys that can really shoot the ball. So I'm not certain Nick Stauskas is going to survive that depth purge.
Yeah.
But I'm definitely excited to see what Okafor can do there.
Well, my thing with Stauskas is that I think they're going to deal some of those guys. Like, if it came down to the deadline, and like the one thing that I've been talking about pretty substantially is that I think Spencer Dinwiddie is like one of the most valuable trade targets around the entire NBA, because he has now a 2-year contract at basically the minimum. So every team can fit him into their mix, and the way his skill set is, it works basically everywhere. So I think he could have a really, really good market for his services if Brooklyn decided, well, he's going to be an unrestricted free agent at the end of next year. We probably won't be able to keep him. Let's just move him now and get peak value for what we can get for him. They already got rid of Sean Kilpatrick, who's a guy that he's having a pretty rough year, but I think he's like a, lower end NBA player who, is probably just as good as Nick Stauskas right now. LeVert obviously is going to be a guy that is going to be ahead of Stauskas. Joe Harris is definitely a guy who's going to be ahead of Stauskas, but again, I think Harris presents himself as a pretty decent trade target for opposing teams as well. So I'm just very interested to see what Stauskas can do, but ultimately this deal is going to be decided on what Jahlil Okafor becomes in Brooklyn. Can he somehow, build his stock, rebuild his stock to what it was? And if he does, what happens with him in the future? Because so the contract issues that Okafor was having in Philadelphia now don't go away, because Philadelphia has declined that option. So Brooklyn can't pay him more than $5 million next year. So if he does blow up and actually does play at the success level that I think is not out of the question, I wouldn't say it's likely, but I think it's possible, then how does Brooklyn get upside out of this other than the second round pick? And, from Philly's case, I think that it was ultimately they were trading a second round pick for Trevor Booker, because both guys had fallen out of their rotation. They were both free agents at the end of the offseason. They weren't going to retain them. So they were just like, okay, we're going to trade a second round pick up a big guy that we're going to use 20 minutes a night, and that's going to be super useful for our playoff run. For Brooklyn, though, I think that second round pick is probably the most valuable piece in this deal, which is, disheartening, but just given the fact that it's going to be difficult for them to retain Okafor if he does blow up, makes it, kind of a reality to me, I guess.
Can we talk about how when I've come across so many guys, because I covered the Pac-12 and, before I moved on to the NBA, and I've been covering the NBA for 4 years. So, I mean, I've written about a lot of guys, and I've come across a lot of guys. Spencer Dinwiddie is one of my favorite guys that I've ever written about. And, I just can't say how happy I am, because I was watching him that night that he tore his knee up when he was at Colorado. And, and that really stunk because I thought he had a chance to be a first-round pick that year.
Think he would have been.
I don't remember whether he went second round or whether he went undrafted, but
he went early second round.
He went early second round. Yeah, so that injury essentially cost him a first-round draft selection. He goes early second round. He goes to Chicago. Chicago lets him go. I mean, this is a guy who's had to grind for his NBA career. And the fact that, he's not only proven himself to be an NBA player, but, I think that at this point, you can argue that he's a starter in this league. I mean, I just, you just can't help be happy for the kid.
Yeah, no, I mean, the game moved toward his skill set, right? Guys that are 6'6", rangy, can shoot, can play make for others, a more skill-based game, but also his defensive ability to switch and play against multiple different player types makes him really, really valuable around the rest of the league, I think. So, like I said, I think he is one of the most valuable trade targets out there in the entire league right now. So, and you said, I've never heard anyone say a bad word about the dude. I've never had any interaction with him beyond it was hilarious. I had a little Twitter thing where he questioned something that I said, and I was like, I'm not actually going at you, man. Nothing happened. But I've never heard anyone say a bad word about him personally. And that's, I don't want to say it's rare in the NBA, but it stands out when you hear those words or you hear about a player that is spoken in that esteem. And yeah, Dinwiddie to me is someone that I have enjoyed rooting for this year. But let's go on ahead and move on. Let's talk about the team that you cover, the Utah Jazz. The Jazz are in, I would say, an interesting spot, to be sure. They were a team that people didn't really know what to make of just due to the Gordon Hayward, subtraction this offseason. They bring in Ricky Rubio, and that deal hasn't really gone all that well just because of I don't even know what to say. I'll ask you about that more than anything. But
that's an understatement.
Yeah, here they are. They're 13-14. They're 8th in the Western Conference right now. They're still very much in the playoff hunt, despite Rudy Gobert missing 4 or 5 weeks, right? So this is a fascinating story, and we haven't even talked about the Donovan Mitchell aspect of it yet. Before we get there, what has been the overall tenor of the Utah Jazz, in the marketplace that you cover?
Well, I think, I think that there's excitement, and, I don't want to go too far ahead and start talking about Donovan Mitchell, but I'm going to probably just go too far ahead and start talking about Donovan Mitchell.
No, you should. Here's the story.
Here's the thing. Here's the thing as a guy who covers the Jazz, and this is where I'm at with the Jazz. No matter what happens this season, whether they go on to make the playoffs or whether they plummet to the bottom of the Western Conference, whether they're great for the rest of the season or whether they suck for the rest of the season, I think that this season has been a success for the Jazz. Right now, today, what's the date? December 10th or December 9th?
It is the 10th.
I'm in Milwaukee and the days just run together.
It is the 10th, and I would agree with you for what it's worth on this. Go ahead. And
this is why I say that no matter what happens for the rest of the season, this season has already been a success for the Jazz. When they lost Gordon Hayward, they lost more than, just a guy who was all-star good. They lost a franchise piece. And I thought it was going to take them, obviously they had already drafted Donovan. But, I thought it was going to take them at least 3 years to figure out whether Donovan was, in fact, another franchise piece.
Well, you know what, too, though? Donovan, when he was drafted, He goes 13th overall. That's like right in the range that people thought of him around the league. Like, somewhere in the, like maybe if you were super high on him, you had him 8. If you were lower on him, you had him at like 16, 17. So 13 was like right there for him. And he was a guy that was thought of as maybe like a little bit like a more athletic Patrick Beverley type that would be a starter, but that would fit best with another primary playmaker with him. Right? Because he still hadn't developed all of those skills, or at least he hadn't shown them yet at Louisville. And I think where you're going to go next is what is the most impressive part of his performance, the fact that he has developed into this franchise piece. So I'll let you go on ahead and explain that part.
Well, that's exactly what it is. I mean, I thought, hey, okay, so remember, okay, let's put it this way. We had this talk in the summer. We did a podcast in the summer where I believe that we were like, okay, the clock is ticking on Rudy Gobert because this is the first year of his long-term deal.
Yep.
If the Jazz don't show improvement by year 3 of this long-term deal, they're going to come to a conundrum where they're going to be like, okay, do we have to trade this guy? And what Donovan has done is he's moved up the clock.
Yep.
2 years, essentially. So what we know right now, or what Jazz fans should know right now, is that minimum, no matter what happens the rest of the year, they have replaced the franchise piece that they lost in Gordon Hayward.
Mm-hmm.
Right? So it takes if you want to be championship good in the NBA, you need 3 franchise pieces. That's basically what you need. You need Klay Thompson, Stephen Curry, and Kevin Durant, or you need,
well, let's just say Klay Thompson, Stephen Curry, and Draymond Green, even before they got Kevin Durant.
Yeah, exactly. You need 3 really, really good guys. Golden State has 1 million of them. So we know that Rudy Gobert is an All-NBA type center. Now we also know that Donovan Mitchell is going to be a franchise piece. He's a guy who's probably, if he's healthy, he's probably going to be an all-star.
Yeah.
So you've answered that question. When I thought that question was going to be, okay, this is his developmental year. Next year he's going to get better. Third year, we're going to see what we have in this kid. But by the third year of that, you're also entering the third year of Rudy Gobert's contract. So you're going to probably have to make a decision on that as well.
Yep.
What Donovan has accomplished is he's moved that clock up 2 years. So now the Jazz know what they have to do going forward into this offseason, which is they have to build around Donovan Mitchell. They have to build around Rudy Gobert. And now that question has definitively been answered, it makes the building process, it makes this offseason that much easier because you don't have to wonder which direction you're going. You know which direction you're going. The Jazz know that every move that they make this offseason, every move that they make potentially at the trade deadline this February is with Donovan Mitchell and Rudy Gobert in mind. And I think no matter what happens on the floor, that the fact that question has been answered, it's a win for the Jazz.
Yeah, no, I 100% agree with you on this. And it's worth pointing out, too, how great of a job Dennis Lindsey has done building this roster and continuing to, even though he's lost a couple of really, really strong pieces in Gordon Hayward and also George Hill, who was incredibly underrated last year. Really, really good player. He was probably a top 50 player in the league last year. So to lose not just an all-star level player in Gordon Hayward, but another top 50, top 60 guy in George Hill, and maintain this level of play. They're worse than they were last year, certainly, but they're still a 500 team with a really strong net rating number right now, and that's without Rudy Gobert for weeks. It's unbelievably impressive, and it's worth pointing out the trade of the offseason for me, or at least for me, what was the dumbest deal of the offseason for the opposing team, was Denver giving up that number 13 pick for Trey Lyles and to take Tyler Lydon at number 24. I just don't know why.
I was just, he'd be starting in Denver by now.
Yeah.
I think that, I think people realized that Donovan Mitchell was good and that he had a chance to be a good player. I don't think anybody knew he was going to be this good.
No.
And I think the only other question that the Jazz have to answer when it comes to Donovan Mitchell is they have to figure out, okay, is he gonna be our shooting guard of the future, or is he gonna be our point guard of the future? Because I think that's gonna affect what their franchise decisions are in the off season as well. And I think it affects a couple of guys that are on the team. Now, I think from having talked to people in the organization, I think what they're looking at Donovan Mitchell is just as a guard. And if that's the case, then that bodes well for Dante Exum, because they look at Dante Exum as a guard. And I think, the Jazz, are envisioning just Dante Exum and Donovan Mitchell both in the backcourt, interchangeable on both sides of the floor, interchangeable offensively, interchangeable defensively, kind of positionless. And if that's the case, then you hear some of the other questions. The other question is, how much are they willing to go to pay Rodney Hood in restricted free agency? Or do they go after a Jabari Parker in restricted free agency? Or do they go after Avery Bradley in unrestricted free agency?
Yep.
So, there are questions that have to be answered. But just the fact that they've answered the question of whether or not Donovan Mitchell is in fact a franchise piece, I think it really bodes well for them.
Yeah, the big guy for me is Rodney Hood, right? So Rodney Hood is a guy that people expected the leap last year. Didn't happen. He dealt with injuries all year. He was hurt. I think it was a hamstring injury, right?
Right. No, it was a lot.
Yeah. So
it was everything.
But what Rodney Hood can do and what Rodney Hood can bring to this organization is he's a really good pick and roll playmaker, and he's the kind of wing that would fit well with Donovan Mitchell as a very strong 20-point per game scorer if he can reach that level, as a playmaker on the wing next to a non-traditional point guard, we'll call Donovan Mitchell. Because even though Rodney Hood's not like this incredible passer, he is a guy that can create in ball screen situations. He's just another guy that you can put out there and say, hey, go get your own shot. He can do that. The rest of the roster is very much in question, and I think a lot of it does kind of depend on where the organization decides to go with Dante Exum. That's just a can of worms that I don't even know how to open, to be honest. It's so impossible to answer that question right now. I feel like that it's going to make next year just an unbelievably difficult decision for them. Really, it's going to be a decision this summer that they have to figure out. The other guy that's been really, really good so far is Alec Burks. And if Alec Burks is going to continue to be this good, he makes everything so much easier because, again, he's a guy who can really create off the bounce, pretty decent passer. If he's knocking down shots, he is just an unbelievable sixth man type who can do a lot of different stuff. So I'm just interested to see where this thing goes from here. I don't really have an answer for how they should build their roster. They have a lot of really interesting pieces, though, that either via trade or via keeping those pieces can present them with options and present Dennis Lindsey with options. And Lindsey has shown the propensity to make the right decisions with those options.
Yeah, I think I think the question with Rodney is, stay on the floor. Your best availability is your availability.
Yep.
And if he can prove that he can stay on the floor, I think that, that dynamic was taken care of, that he's proven that he could be a really good sixth man for the Jazz. Alec is gone from a guy who's been a non-factor to a guy that the way he's been playing the last 3 weeks, he's making his four-year, $40 million contract look like a bargain.
Yep.
So, if you can go forward with Rodney Hood and Alec Burks on your second unit, then your second unit is pretty potent.
Yep.
So they have to figure that out. They have to figure out what they're going to do with Derrick Favors.
I'm just kind of not considering him a part of the core. Like, is that wrong?
Yeah, I think he's going to be traded. And, Derrick is probably the guy that I've developed probably the best relationship with on the team. And, I can tell you from talking to him countless of times, I think he knows he's going to be traded at some point. He knows he's either going to be traded or he's going to be somewhere else next year. One of the two. That's interesting. And then a lot of the rest of the roster outside of so let's see, you have Gobert, you have Ingles, you have Hood, you have Mitchell, you have Dante Exum, and Alec Burks. And then, a lot of the rest of that roster is on, 1-year deals. So the rest of the roster is going to be really fluid in terms of what happens the next year. And Lindsey set that up. Lindsey set that up intentionally because I think that he wants to really be a player in free agency. And I think that with the saturated market, I think they can get somebody in free agency because they're going to be able to, they're going to have the dollars. They're going to have max dollars. And B, the other thing is, they're going to have two pieces that really recruit. Like, playing with Donovan Mitchell and playing with Rudy Gobert, those are two pretty good recruiting tools, and the Jazz are going to have that.
Yeah, that's 100% right. And again, I can't emphasize enough how good Dennis Lindsey has been, because the other aspect of this, all these guys on 1-year deals, right? Royce O'Neal has been a really nice find when he's been on the floor.
Yeah, he's been a big find.
Yeah, Epe Udoh, bringing him over from the EuroLeague after he was the EuroLeague MVP last year, has been awesome. He's been such a good defender, and they've been great with him on the floor this year. Thabo Sefolosha has been another really, really nice little piece that they can deploy at the 4. They can play him a little bit at the 3. He's going to bring defense. They know that, the shot goes sometimes it doesn't, but he's shooting well, at least so far this year. That's right?
Yeah, he's shooting well. I mean, he's playing really well.
Yeah.
He's also played a lot more 4 than 3 this year, and I think a lot of that has been out of necessity as well.
Well, yeah, because Joe Johnson's been hurt for a little bit. So,
right.
Not having Joe Johnson as that small ball 4 has pushed Thabo there. But, when Joe Johnson comes back, I would feel like that would be an interesting forward combination off the bench, So I'm interested in that, and Thabo obviously can start. Joe can start. They can bring the lineups in so many different ways. Urebko has been a nice find offensively for them. He's really helped them, again, with the absence of Joe Johnson. So I like the way that they build out the roster on the fringes. From, 1 to, say, 12, this is one of the better rosters in the NBA to me, I think. Like, if you're talking purely in terms of depth. So maybe I should say not 1 to 12. Maybe I should say from, 5 to 12. This is one of the best rosters in the NBA. They just need to continue to find those franchise pieces, like you said. And, Donovan Mitchell has been the guy that has changed that fortune for them significantly. We've mentioned Derrick Favors, probably not going to be on this team next year. Ricky Rubio is another guy that has just been awful this year. There's really just not another real way to put it. I don't know what the Jazz should do with him at this stage. I don't know what his trade value would even look like. I don't know how they could even, how to even get him to play better right now than what he has this year. Where are you at on this Rubio experiment and how it's gone so poorly for the Jazz? How has it gone this poorly?
Well, it's a real conundrum for the Jazz. And, I can tell you that, they traded for Ricky Rubio because, in large part, Gordon Hayward wanted to play with him.
That went well.
That certainly went well. And it's just been one of those things where, it just hasn't worked because, you have him in the starting lineup, and Derrick Favors and Rudy Gobert, they desperately need to be surrounded by three shooters. And, now you have three non-shooters in the starting lineup, and that's why the Gobert-Rubio pick and roll just doesn't work, because guys, just collapse in the lap of Gobert and concede jump shots to Rubio, and he's not been able to hit him outside of the first couple of weeks of the season. The thing that surprised me is that Rubio hasn't been good defensively, and he hasn't taken care of the ball.
Yep.
Those are the two things that really surprised me, because those have been his strengths for 7 years, and he hasn't been good. And I think it's a real conundrum for the Jazz, because they gave up a pretty valuable first round pick for Rubio, and B, they're going to have him for another year, and it's just, and C, I don't think they're going to be able to trade him, at all. And that's the biggest thing, So, and D, if you can't trade him, and he's not in your plans, and right now, he's, I don't want to say he's unplayable, but he's, you're not a better team with him on the floor.
No.
How do you sit him? How do you, it becomes much more of a problem next year than it does this year, because next year, I think that, because this year to me was the Jazz's pivot year, and next year they're gonna be ready to go.
Yeah.
And whatever the team that they roll with next year, I think they're going to want to try to contend with, and or as best they can. This year, they want to find their level, and they wanted to pivot this year, and I think they can make the playoffs this year. But I think next year they want to be better, and want to put themselves in a position to be better. And Rubio's, it's an issue, and I don't know how they solve that issue right now.
Well, I'll give Jazz fans a little bit of hope on the shooting from Rubio, right? Like, the shooting has just been abject this year. It's been terrible. He is currently shooting 35% on wide open jumpers, like shots with defenders not within 6 feet of him. He's shooting 35% on those. He's actually shooting worse on those than he is on contested jumpers. I would think that will rebound in some way. Like, I would think that will somehow revert to the mean. If that happens and defenders have to at least pay him a little bit more respect, maybe, the offense starts to click a little bit more with him, and maybe he starts to become a little bit more engaged defensively. I'm really just kind of grasping at straws, though. It's been rough. Like, I don't really even understand it, to be honest. Like, he was never this bad in Minnesota. And the craziest thing is that even when the shooting numbers were not good and the finishing at the rim was not good, and he'd get a little bit turnover happy, the team was always better with him on the floor, because he created that unselfishness, and, his defense was always strong. Without the defense, the Jazz are not better with him on the floor. It's just a fact. This team is not good with him on the floor right now. And it's a real problem that Dennis Lindsey is going to have to solve, because, or at least maybe Quinn Snyder has to solve it. I don't know. Maybe the coaching staff has to. It's a bizarre situation, though.
Well, the thing that I look at, here's the way I look at, Ricky, and I think this would probably cause me to have a little bit of sympathy, just as a guy who played the game and who played the point guard spot. This has been a real adjustment from Minnesota, and I'll tell you how. When he was in Minnesota, he had the ball. Like, the offense ran through him. Like, Kevin Love was a huge scorer for them, and then Karl Anthony Towns was a huge scorer for them. But all of that offense ran through Ricky, and he had the ball in his hands. That's why he averaged 9, 10 assists a game. through his whole career. And when you're a guy that has the ball in your hands, you know, when you're involved offensively, you're going to be more engaged defensively. You know, so I think that was. I think that's been a thing for him. I also think that, you know, he's, you know, for most of his career he played with Kevin Love. And for the rest of that, most of his career he's played with Karl Anthony Towns. Those are two bigs that are just drastically different than Rudy Gobert. And it's different passing to Karl Anthony Towns or Kevin Love than it is to Rudy Gobert. Both of those guys are pick and pop. Both of those guys have great hands. You know, Gobert's just a different animal. You know, so yeah, I think going from one offense to a different offense, going from playing with one type of big man to playing with another type of big man, you know, that's affected him. And I don't know what to say about the defense. His defense is, I mean, it's just been really bad. You know, he still leads the Jazz in steals. He still can go out there and he can create turnovers. But, you know, when it comes to being solid and when it comes to staying in front of guys, he just hasn't been able to stay in front of guys this year. And I think that's been the biggest surprise / disappointment of all.
Yeah, I think I agree with you, but it's probably not worth harping on Ricky Rubio at this stage. Overall, I think the Jazz are in a pretty good spot. Like Tony said, they should be pretty happy with where they are at this stage. So we're going to move on, but before we do that, I've got a couple of sponsors for you. Holiday cash, you need it, and I know where you can get it. MyBookie is the place to score serious cash on your sports predictions. Believe it or not, the holidays are just around the corner, and that means plenty of parties, gifts, and spending. It also means there's lots of football, basketball, and hockey games you can score big on every single day. Man up and play like the pros on game day. You can play the money line, side, or total. MyBookie is your hookup for all of your betting needs, and it offers fast payouts when you win. Where you bet is just as important as who you're betting on. And if you want to make money betting the games, you got to go to mybookie.ag. They're the only site I would recommend. I trust them, but you don't have to take my word for it. Check them out for yourselves. They have odds on every single matchup. They have a mobile site that makes wagering on your smartphone a breeze. Join now and MyBookie will match your deposit with up to a 50% bonus. Use the promo code GameTheory, that's GAMETHEORY, to activate that offer. Visit mybookie.ag today. You play, you win, you get paid. Our second sponsor is DraftKings. Listen up, Hoops fans. Basketball season is back, and now that your favorite hardwood heroes have returned to action, it's time for you to put your fantasy knowledge to the test to win huge cash prizes every night playing one-day fantasy basketball at DraftKings.com. At DraftKings, there are so many ways to play. Choose from public contests with huge cash prizes or private contests where you can compete against your friends. They've even got beginner and casual contests where you'll play against people of a similar skill level. The best part, you get to draft a new team every day, and drafting a team is the best part of fantasy. The only thing better is winning cash doing it. There are huge cash prizes and bragging rights awaiting only at DraftKings.com. Use the code CLNS at DraftKings to play for free with your first deposit for your share of $10,000 in total prizes tonight. Don't wait. Use the code CLNS at DraftKings.com now to choose your lineup, and you can win serious cash tonight. That's code CLNS only at DraftKings.com. The game inside the game. We're going to move on. We're going to talk about Oklahoma City here. Tony has gotten a chance to see them up close and personal a couple of times this year. Just recently, the Jazz played them last week. The Thunder beat the Jazz, I believe, by 6, if I remember correctly. It's been a weird year for Oklahoma City, though. They're sitting at 12-13 right now. They're currently 9th. They're right behind the Jazz in the Western Conference. They only have a net rating of 1.9. You know, I don't know how the meshing of Carmelo Anthony, Paul George, and Russell Westbrook has gone. It seems like it's been kind of a messy fit so far. What have you seen from the Oklahoma City Thunder that, either has you positive about their direction due to the last couple weeks or negative about where they're at, just given the way they've started?
Actually, I'm still kind of positive on them, and not kind of positive. I'm still positive on them because I think there are two things that are at play here. Eventually, talent wins out, right? You eventually, when you have Paul George and Russell Westbrook on the same team, even if Carmelo Anthony has diminished into a fringe top 50 player, which I think that we can all say that he has, but even if that's the case, right, like, you know, you still have Paul George and Russell Westbrook, like, come on. You know, so eventually talent wins out. The second thing is Steven Adams has made the leap, and he is a heck of a player.
Yep.
I mean, he is a really, really good player. Really good player.
I would say he is their third best player.
I would absolutely say he's their third best player. It's not even a question. He's a great defender. He's figured out how to score offensively. I mean, he finishes at the basket. He's really good at the pick and dot, but he's also developed a floater in the lane, and he's starting to make his free throws, and he's such a dominant physical presence. I mean, he's just a really good basketball player, and people don't realize it because, you know, there's Russell Westbrook and Paul George on the team.
There's star power.
And Carmelo Anthony. So, you know, you look at that, those are two. And the third dynamic is the fact that they're the fourth best defensive team in the league.
Yep.
You know, so you have a team that has two all-star caliber talents, a really good center, and a really good defense, and length and athleticism at every position. And eventually they're going to put it together. Eventually they're going to make a run. Eventually they're going to end up being the fourth best team in the West. I think that's an inevitability. So that's kind of where I'm at with Oklahoma City. Yeah, it's kind of fun right now. You know, it's kind of fun right now to, you know, kind of to pick at their warts and see what's wrong with them. Yada yada la la li li. But the thing is, they're going to be good.
Yeah.
They're just not going to stay at this level all year. You know, so that's kind of where I'm at with them. I do think that the Carmelo Anthony thing needs some working out. I think that Carmelo needs to take a look in the mirror and check his ego and eventually figure out, hey, I'm Dwayne Wade. Let me come off the bench and average 15 points a game.
I think that would help.
That's the best thing that's happened to Cleveland this year, right?
Yeah.
Like, Dwayne Wade woke up one day and, you know, went and pillow talked with Gabrielle, and then went to Ty Lue and was like, you know what? I think I should come off the bench. And since that, he's been like one of the best 6 men in the league.
Well, it's that,
and I don't.
You know, he gets a chance to actually dominate the action more as a sixth man.
Exactly.
Because they play him without LeBron, and he gets a chance to dominate the ball and make plays in the way that he can, and he's a really good player at feasting on second units in the same way that I think Melo would be great at just feasting on second units. You bring him in like at the 6-minute mark of the first quarter, play him for 12 minutes in a row, that end of the first quarter, beginning of the second quarter, and just let him feast. He'll play some minutes with Russell Westbrook. He'll play some minutes with Paul George, and, you know, just make sure that one of those guys is on the floor at all times, and make sure that, you know, you kind of stagger minutes for them a little bit.
Yeah, and I don't understand why Carmelo can't do that. And I think, you know, it's kind of like having too many cooks in the kitchen, right? Like, Russell Westbrook needs the ball. Paul George needs the ball. You know, Carmelo Anthony needs the ball. If you could break one of those guys up and stagger those minutes, then that's good for everybody. And, you know, and I don't think that starting all three and staggering them that way is going to alleviate that problem. They need Carmelo to just say, hey, I need to come off the bench, you know, for the good of the team. And, you know, that hasn't happened yet, and that's kind of disappointing. And, you know, to me, it's kind of a legacy thing with Carmelo because, you know, this is, you know, you're 33 years old, dog. Like, do you want to win or not?
Yeah.
Like, the clock is ticking. Like, do you want to win? And, you know, this is it's telling to me that this is the first time that he's been in a position to win since 2012, and he's not doing everything that he can do personally to make that happen.
So yeah, just for reference here, 511 out of 785 of Carmelo Anthony's minutes have come with both Paul George and Russell Westbrook on the floor. That's
too much.
Yeah, they've missed some games in there as well. So, like, you know, I think that if I remember correctly, Russ has sat out a couple, and I don't remember if Paul George did or not. But, like, there have been chances, you know, the numbers are higher when those three guys play in the same game together. It's probably more like 75% of their minutes come together. And like Tony said, I think that's too much. And it's not like they've been bad together. That three-man lineup has a 5.1 net rating. That's fine. You know, their net rating as a team is right around 2 right now. And you know, it's not about that necessarily, though. It's about trying to bring up the bench unit for me, and about trying to figure out the best way to kind of mix and match all these pieces together. I mean, one problem early in the season, too, though, was that Patrick Patterson started so poorly that he was almost unplayable for the first 10 games. You know what I mean? Like, it took a while for him to kind of get into shape and get rolling here. The big question for me, though, what do you make of Russell Westbrook's play this year? How do you think he has adjusted to having these two high-usage players next to him in the lineup and trying to find a way to get them involved a little bit more?
Well, you know, the thing that I was worried about last year, to me, is coming to fruition this year, is that, you know, last year there was so much heat on him. And, yeah, he had this historic season. And, yeah, you know, his numbers were, you know, were just out of this world. And, yeah, he had an MVP season, but I think it took a toll on him physically. And I think that you're seeing that. His efficiency numbers, which were never great to begin with, but his efficiency numbers are down across the board this year. And they're almost at career lows. Russell Westbrook is still a great player. He's still one of the top 3 point guards in the league, and he's still one of the top 10 players in the league, one of the top 6 or 7 players in the league, but he's not the same guy that he was last year. And, well, against the Jazz he was, because he had 34, 13, and 13. But, you know, overall he hasn't been the same guy that he was last year. And, you know, he hasn't been great defensively this year. You know, he hasn't shot the ball well. But he's still doing, you know, the Russell Westbrook things that we're accustomed to. You know, so that was my worry, was that last year there was so much responsibility heaped on him that it was going to kind of affect the rest of his career. And, you know, I think that he's been worse this year than he was last year. And it's not the numbers, it's the efficiency, it's the shooting, it's the percentages. And those are the telltale signs. So, you know, not everybody is a cyborg like LeBron. Like, you know,
Russ might be the closest thing, though.
Yeah, I mean, he could be the closest thing, but,
yeah,
you know, not everybody's just going to come in, you know, shoot 58% and 43% from three-point range in year 15 like LeBron is.
For sure.
But, you know, I think that he's still been great. Still think he's, you know, all NBA. You know, but he just hasn't been as good as he was last year. But, you know, it's still early. I mean, December is still early.
Yeah.
You know, February or March, we could well be talking about a different scenario. And that's what people just don't realize about an NBA season. Like, it's such a long season that, you know, the things that we talk about, the narratives that we talk about 1 month, they could change in the next month.
Well, that and like just the NBA becoming more popular and becoming, you know, for my money, I would say the NBA is probably like the most social sport, right? Where we follow these storylines like nobody else's business, right? Like the NFL doesn't have this 24-hour news cycle that the NBA does, in my opinion. The personalities are not the same. So I think that plays a part in the overreaction that we see here. I ultimately agree with you. I was someone who said that I thought Oklahoma City had the best chance to give Golden State a run in the preseason, in the playoffs this coming year. I don't think I would.
Was clearly wrong about that.
What?
I was clearly wrong about that.
Yeah, like I don't think I would say that necessarily.
It's by a mile.
It's definitely Houston by a mile, but having said that, I'm probably pretty comfortable saying that I still think Oklahoma City's probably third. Like if I was ranking the teams in the West who I think could win or maybe the teams who could beat Golden State, I still think they'd be second for me. Like I still think they have the pieces most equipped to give Golden State a run.
Yeah, absolutely. I mean, their defense and their ability to their star power, and they can guard. They can guard, like they can really guard, and they have multiple wings. I actually think Cleveland's more equipped to beat Golden State than the Cleveland team that was last year.
I agree with that.
Because of that. So it's really interesting because maybe it's just like wishful thinking, and it's just like, hey, we want somebody to give Golden State a run, but I mean, I feel like there are a couple of teams that have kind of risen to their, even if not risen to their level, but at least risen to their conversation. You know what I mean? Like they're in conversation with them.
I'm not there. I will say that. Houston's been really good this year, and I think Houston, honestly, is probably better than Golden State this year. And the Stephen Curry injury throws things for a loop in a pretty big way, right? Like, what if the ankle doesn't totally respond in the way that Golden State hopes it will over the course of the season? But, yeah, I mean, I'm still, like, if you're still asking me Golden State or the field, I'm still taking Golden State.
So if you still take Golden State in 5 over Houston, like I think that's a 6-game series now.
Yeah, I think that's probably right. I agree. I think that's probably a 6-game series now. Could be 5, depending on the way that guys like Ryan Anderson, how they react to playing against Golden State. I think that could be a real problematic matchup for them. But, Houston now has more pieces to make things work. Chris Paul and Eric Gordon and James Harden, those 3 guys alone can get hot enough to beat a team in a 7-game series, probably. Maybe not Golden State, but, a normal team, those 3 guys are enough. And then you have guys like Trevor Ariza and Clint Capella has really developed well. And, at some point later this week, I'll probably talk about Houston on a podcast just because it's how they have gone from where they were in 2015-16 to where they are now is really, really interesting to me. But Houston, for me, is probably number 2 right now. I'd probably even have them ahead of Cleveland, to be honest. But I'm still taking Golden State against the field. Like you said, to me, it's like Houston is not a 5-game series. It's a 6-game series now. But I still think they're probably the best bet to beat them. And if it's a 6-game series, I'm still taking the field.
Well, and that's the thing. I think with Houston, I think that I think more than anything, they are the one team that right now can make Stephen Curry guard. Right, like they can go small and they can force Curry to guard either Chris Paul, James Harden, or Eric Gordon. And I don't think people realize how big that is because
I don't know if they do though, because wouldn't Golden State just hide him on PJ Tucker?
Well, you don't have to play Tucker. You play Ariza at the 4.
And
you play Ariza at the 4, and then you play Capella at the 5, and your 1, 2, 3 is Harden. Paul and Eric Gordon.
I'd probably hide him on Ariza, to be honest, but I know I agree with what you're saying.
You could but then I think you're screwing up everything else.
Yeah.
But,
you are.
Yeah. I mean, maybe that's semantics. Maybe that's getting that too far down into the weeds. But it's like they have the ability to really make. They have the ability to make Steph uncomfortable defensively.
That's a good point.
And that's an interesting dynamic, and it's not a dynamic I think that any other team has. Like, if you're playing Cleveland, you can just go ahead and put them on J.R. Smith. If you're playing against San Antonio, just go ahead and put them on Danny Green.
Yep.
But
Oklahoma City, they'll toss him on Robertson.
Put him on Robertson. There's somebody on all of those teams except for Houston where he really has to guard. So that's an interesting dynamic to me.
Yeah, I agree with that. Let's move on. Let's talk about the NBA draft, because Tony follows the NBA draft probably pretty damn close to as religiously as I do. So I'm going to let Tony just I'm going to ask him, where do you want to start? Like, who do you want to talk about?
Do we want to put up a top five right now?
Sure, we can do that.
What's your top five big four?
I'd probably still have Doncic number 1. I would have Ayton number 2. I would have Bagley number 3. I would still probably have Michael Porter at number 4. And then I think I would have Jaren Jackson at number 5. And I'll even go a step further and say I have Colin Sexton at number 6.
So, okay. So you got Mo Bamba no higher than 7.
Yeah, I'd have him at 7. So I'll even say 7.
You have Robert Williams no higher than 8.
I have Robert Williams like in the teens.
You have Robert Williams in the teens.
Yeah.
So you have Mikal Bridges at 8.
I think I'd have Kevin Knox there, but I would have Bridges like 9 or 10. Yeah. I'd probably have both Bridges as 9 and 10.
So this is a pretty darn good top 10.
Yeah, it is. It's a great top 10 this year.
It's a great top 10. So if you're in the top 10 of this draft, anybody in the NBA, any fan base in the NBA, if you're in the top 10 of this draft, you're gonna get a good basketball player.
Yeah.
Because that is a great top 10.
It is.
All right. I'm a little different than you.
There's a lot of room for debate in this year because of it.
Huh?
There's a lot of room for debate this year, I think, because there are so many good players.
So I'm going Doncic at 1. I think me and you are both like kindred spirits in our love for Doncic. I mean,
you know what?
Ridiculous.
Jonathan Gavoni brought up a great point, and John is awesome at this stuff. He brought up a really great point on Woj's podcast. So, like, the question was, like, is taking Doncic seen as a risk? And John said, no, I think that taking Bagley or, whoever else you want to take at number 1 would be a risk, because we've seen what Doncic can do. He's already kicked Evan Fournier's ass in Eurobasket. Yeah. Like, we know what he is. He's not a risk.
Yeah. He's not a risk to me at all. The kid is a killer. He is a complete dog on the floor. He's 6'8". He can play. I think he's going to be able to play 4 positions in the NBA. No, I don't think he can guard 4 positions. I only think he can guard 2 positions.
Agree.
But he can play the 1, 2, 3, or 4. He's a terrific shooter. He is a phenomenal passer. My only question with him is that he's not a top-end athlete, but he's so skilled.
Yep.
That he reminds me, like, if Larry Bird played in 2017, I imagine him looking like Luka Doncic.
I think Bird was a better shooter, but yeah, I agree from like a feel perspective. Yeah,
from like a feel perspective, from I think it's different when you. I think it's different when you look at how it like Larry. If Larry Bird played now as opposed to 1983, his handles will look different. Like the way he handled the ball, all of that stuff will be different. Like so that's why I said, like, if Larry Bird played in 2017, he'd look a lot like Luka Doncic.
I can see that. Yeah.
that's where I'm at with him. And
you're like,
just think that
you mentioned the idea of like just the non-top end athlete stuff being a concern, and I was worried about that for a long time with like his ability to get separation, right? To get that jump shot off, to make those creative passes. But the more I watch him, the less that concern goes away for me, or the more it goes away for me, because he's just so gifted at changing speeds, and he's good at changing direction. You know, he does that thing every single game, at least once or twice a game, where he just puts the defender in jail in pick and roll settings, gets him on his ass, and he'll either shoot like a little floater from 8 feet or he'll dish a ridiculous pass. Like he's so good at every little skill thing that you're looking for from an NBA ball handler.
Yeah, I agree completely, and I think that, you know, I think that it'd be. I just struggle to see how he won't become a star at this level.
Yeah.
So he'd be number one on my big board. I'd go Bagley 2.
Yep.
I'd still go Michael Porter 3.
Mm-hmm.
I'd go 8 and 4. I think you're right about Jaren Jackson. I'd go Jaren Jackson 5. I'd go Bamba 6.
Mm-hmm.
Sexton 7. I'd probably go Bridges 8.
Mikal, not Miles,
9.
right?
Mikal Bridges 8, yes. Kevin Knox 9, and probably. I mean, I'm kind of torn on Trae Young. How do you feel about Trae Young?
He's awesome. I think that you could easily have Trae Young at 10 right now if you wanted to.
I'm very in on Trae Young. I'm kind of worried. He's more Chris Jackson to me than Stephen Curry.
Yeah, I think that's right for sure. You know, like at number 10, I think it's a tricky spot, right? Like, I think after those top 9, this thing is very, very open right now. You could have Bruce Brown. You could have Trae Young. You could have Robert Williams, I think, there. Man, it gets hard, though, like, after that. Like, who are you excited about after that little run right now? Like, it's hard for me to find guys I'm excited about.
Well, I'm excited about Bruce Brown because I think he's one of the most competitive kids in the class.
That's true.
And I think that I'm more excited about Bruce Brown if you can prove to me that he can play the point.
Yep.
In the league.
Jim Larinaga thinks he's going to play the point in the league. Like, he's telling everyone he thinks he's going to play the point.
Well, if he can, then I'm more excited about him because he's 6'4", he's 210 pounds, he's rock solid, he's an absolute dog on the floor. Yep. I mean, he just gets after you. You know, to me, I think he reminds me of Marcus Smart, but he's better offensively.
I don't know if he has the feel offensively that Smart does. Like, Smart just can't shoot, but he does like all that little stuff.
Right, he does a little stuff.
Yeah. But I see where you're going with that, though. Like, I think that that's actually a really good comparison. Like, Bruce makes the smart pass, much in the same way that Marcus, that's really bad English, but much in the same way Marcus Smart makes the intelligent pass, Bruce Brown does that.
Right.
I think Marcus is probably a little bit more versatile defensively, too, just because he's thicker and can slide down to 4s a little bit easier. But, you know, Bruce Brown, you're still getting a guy who can guard 1 through 3.
Right. And, you know, you're getting a guy that's competitive. Like if you're a Jazz fan and you come away from this draft with Bruce Brown, you've had a really good draft. Because if you compare Bruce Brown with Donovan Mitchell, like, my gosh.
That'd be awesome. That'd be so great.
You'd have, like, the most competitive backcourt ever.
Yeah, no, 100%. That'd be a really, really good one.
Yeah, I mean, so I really like this draft. Like, I love Colin Sexton. Like, he's a dog. Like, I thought that, you know, he kept Alabama in the game against Arizona last night. And he did it on the road. And I think that was great. Like, I think that this top 5, as good as this current draft classes, that are currently rookies in the NBA, this top 5 is just as good.
Yep.
So it's I mean, the NBA is in a great place, man. The influx of talent is really phenomenal. And then next year you get Cam Reddish and RJ Barrett coming in.
Yeah.
So,
I will say I think 2019 is considerably weaker than 2018 right now.
Yeah. I do think 2019 is considerably weaker. Especially you get in. And I think this class, it's not as deep as 2017. Like, you're not getting Jordan Bell at 37
right
in this class.
That's what scares me about this class. Like, that's what I meant when I'm not really excited about anyone else. Like I think Shake Milton's fine. Like, I have Shake Milton as like a top 20 guy right now. He's 6'6".
Right.
He shoots. He competes defensively. He has long arms. But, like, he just doesn't have, like, a crazy amount of game for a point guard. Like, Justin Jackson is a guy I have, like, at the end of the first round right now. I don't know that Justin Jackson's an NBA player, to be honest. Like,
yeah, Justin's okay. I thought he had a pretty good freshman year. I mean, but, what does he do other than shoot the ball? And
he's not shooting this year even.
That's also a good point.
It's hard. It's hard to find his spot. And, like, I have Grayson Allen, like, at the end of the first round this year. Like, I think he probably goes first. And Grayson's fine, but Grayson's a 7th or 8th man in the NBA.
Grayson's okay. I'm kind of off the Grayson train because, number one, he's a one-position guy in the NBA, right?
Yep.
Like, he's absolutely a shooting guard. Like, he's never can't play the 3, can't play the 1.
Absolutely.
Number 2, who does he guard in the NBA?
No one.
Nobody. Like, who does he guard? So who can he guard at the 2? And the third thing is, how does he score in the NBA? Like, he's not JJ Redick. Like, we know how JJ Redick scored. Like,
no,
JJ Redick is one of the greatest shooters ever, right? And he's one of the. But JJ Redick didn't even get good until he figured out how to manipulate screens.
Yep.
And that took him 5 years.
Yep.
Grayson Allen is different than JJ Redick. He's not a knockdown shooter, even though he's shooting it very well this year.
I think he is, to be honest, but I understand that.
Well, he's shooting it very well this year, so I could back off of that. But the other thing with him, I mean, he makes his business off the dribble, and he does his stuff off the dribble. He does his business off the dribble, and that's not gonna be who he is in the league. So he's gonna have to reinvent his game a little bit.
Well, there's that. I think that where I like his skill set is that he's really good at coming off of screens. He's not JJ necessarily, but he's good at it, and he's really good in spot up situations, attacking closeouts, and being a shot maker. He was dealing with injuries a lot last year. He shot 36% from 3. As a sophomore, he shot 42%. Right now, he's at 43%. I think that's basically what he is as a shooter. Like, I think he is a 40% three-point shooter, even from the NBA line. The key for me is that, I don't think he can defend anyone. Like, I think he's just a little too slow-footed, despite the fact that he's a better leaper than what I think, he gets credit for necessarily. The other problem is that, if a guy is going to come in and struggle a little bit, which I think we both agree Grayson probably will struggle a little bit with the adjustment to the NBA, I don't know that he's going to engender the same respect or the level of respect that he needs to develop because of his reputation, right? Like, he has this reputation as an entitled brat, right or wrong, and I think NBA teams will give him a chance, but, like, I don't know how guys in the locker room react to Grayson Allen. Does he get the time?
Well, I think it's gonna happen. I think with Grayson, it's gonna be all about how he comes in and works.
Yep.
And I think that's gonna be the thing with him. But I just think that he's a guy's skill set that, like I thought when he was a freshman, I thought he was Bobby Shura. And
I like that. I like that a lot.
Yeah, but I no longer think he's Bobby Sorta. That's the problem.
What makes you think he can't be Bobby Sura? Because I mean, like,
because Bobby Sura is more athletic.
Yeah, maybe.
He was more athletic, and Bobby Sura played in a different era.
Yeah.
Like the era that Bobby Sura played in, he played with John Starks. Like if John Starks were playing in this era, what would he be? He'd be a ninth man to me. He wouldn't be a starter.
Probably not, because he wasn't a shooter. Same with Sura. Like, Sura wasn't a shooter, though, was the problem.
Right. But he was an athlete, and he's a better athlete than Grayson.
Yeah.
And he played 25 years ago. Well, he didn't play that long ago, but, I mean, he played 20 years ago.
Yeah, his last year was like 15 years ago, so yeah.
Yeah. So, you know, it's a different league than the one Bobby played in.
Yeah.
You know, and you know your wings right now. Like Rodney Hood is a 6-man. Rodney Hood is 6'8", and you know if he played 15 years ago, Rodney Hood would be averaging 25 points a game.
Rodney could start in today's NBA though. Like Rodney is a good player.
He can start in today's NBA.
Yeah.
He's absolutely a starter in today's NBA. It's just I'm just looking at what his situation is with the Jazz, but he could absolutely start in today's NBA, and you're going to see that because when Rodney gets on the market, I mean I think that his you're just going to see where his market is by what his paycheck is going to be next year.
Yeah, I mean, like he's going to get like $15 million a year probably. I would say something like that
easily.
Yeah,
easily, and the Jazz are going to match it.
They should.
Guys who can score like Rodney Hood aren't a dime a dozen.
Yeah, I agree with
that. This draft is going to be fascinating, man. Like to me, it's crazy that in this draft, Jaren Jackson is no better than the 5th prospect. And I think he has Kevin Durant upside defensively. Like, I really think, like, I don't think he can be Kevin Durant offensively, but I think he can be Kevin Durant defensively. And
they'll be utilized differently. Like, I think Jaren plays center in the NBA a little bit more than, like, Durant does. Durant certainly plays center some in the playoffs now, but for the most part, he gets he plays the 3 and the 4. I think Jaren's going to be like a 4-5 guy, but I agree with you that Kevin Durant has developed into an all NBA level defender, and I think that that's where Jaren Jackson's upside is. I think he is a legit.
Did I say Kevin Durant?
Yeah.
I didn't mean Kevin Durant defender. I meant Kevin Garnett.
Oh wow, you're very high on Jaren Jackson then.
Defensively.
Yeah,
just defensively. Not offensively, defensively. I think Jaren Jackson could be player of the year defensively in this league.
That's not impossible.
At some point.
It's not impossible. He's really that good. Like he is. He can move his feet really, really well. He really likes to defend. He's a really good. He's still developing as a rim protector. I don't want to say he's a really good rim protector yet, but he's getting there. Defensively, that's where his upside is. I think he's certainly an all NBA level talent defensively. And then you have Mohamed Bamba, who again, like Jaren Jackson is not the best defensive prospect in this draft. Even Mohamed Bamba is, like, pretty clearly, I think.
Yeah. And Bamba's athleticism and his upside offensively is pretty good as well. I'm just, I like Shaka Smart. I just think Bamba went to the wrong school.
It's a weird fit,
Look, I don't like John Calipari personally, but look, he develops his guys, and I think that his guys gets better. And I think that when you're at that level, you gotta remember when. So last year, Dan Adebayo, everybody's like, okay, he's going to NC State because he wants to play with Dennis Smith, right?
Yep.
And then Bam tweets, I'm going to make a business decision. And then Bam goes to Kentucky, right? Like, that was
and I think that Bamba went to Texas because of his relationship with Shaka Smart. But I think he should have gone to Kentucky.
Probably true. I mean, I think they would have made room for him. Like, they'd have figured out what to do with Nick Richards and PJ Washington and all those guys. But, I mean, like, to be frank, they probably would not play them just because Bamba's a lot better. But
right.
I think he wanted a spot where he knew he was going to be able to get 30 minutes a night, and he's getting that, like, whenever he's not in foul trouble. So it's a weird deal. Like, I think it's a weird fit for him offensively more than defensively, because they're giving him the green light to shoot threes, but he's not really a good 3-point shooter yet. They want him to be a good screen and roll big man, but he's not a good screener yet. It's just a weird deal. Like, I don't really know what to make of him yet. I worry about him doing the little things on the floor. It seems like he's trying to develop the big parts of his game, the sexy parts of his game, the 3-point shot, the blocks, the thunderous blocks, right? Where he needs to improve is he needs to do the little things better. He needs to set really good screens and make contact and roll hard to the basket. He just doesn't do that stuff yet.
Yeah, but he also doesn't have the guards that can deliver.
That's Matt Coleman's pretty good. Like, for a college point guard, Matt Coleman's pretty good.
Matt is pretty good. Matt is still learning because Matt's still a freshman.
That's true. It's a good point. Like, I'm not a big Andrew Jones guy. Like, Andrew Jones gets talked about as a late first-round pick, and I don't really like that.
Well, I think when he declared for the draft, I think that it was pretty apparent that he needed to go back to school. Problem with Andrew Jones is that he's a real tweener because he doesn't shoot the ball well enough to be a shooting guard. He doesn't handle the ball well enough to be a point guard. I do like him as an athlete. I do like the fact that he's 6'4", 6'5". But I think that for him to be successful in the league, he's got to play the point, and he's not playing the point in Texas.
Yep.
So, it's kind of like, what are we doing here? And that's the thing that, I would tell all these McDonald's All-Americans, I would tell all of the high school guys, you can't pick a school based on, where you want to go. You got to pick a school based on what's best for you basketball-wise. Like,
scheme-wise.
Trae Young, right. If Trae Young goes to Kansas, like it was rumored, is he the same player as he is right now? Do you think
he's sitting right now,
Bill Self, do you think for a second Bill Self will let him come down and pull from 30 feet?
No.
At any point,
no.
At any time? No, not at all. But he goes to Oklahoma, and surprisingly they have a lot more talent around him than I thought they would. But he's able to do his thing, and that's a guy that went somewhere really really good for his fit, and he's gonna be a top 10, top 15 pick because of it.
I agree.
The
point guards are fascinating just because of that. Like, we've been trying to figure out who the second best point guard in this class is behind Colin Sexton for a while. We were kind of trying to hope it would be Bruce Brown pigeonholing himself into a point guard. We were hoping that Trayvon Duval would learn to shoot or learn to turn the ball over less. It's Trae Young. Like, pretty clearly to me, the second best point guard in this draft class is Trae Young.
Where do you stand on Trae Duval? Because I think he's got to figure out how to make a shot, man.
I would be willing, in this particular draft class, I would be okay taking him around like 20 right now, just because there's no one else that has really stepped up. But he's going to be a guy that I think a team is either going to get a lot out of him, or they're going to he's going to get like his 4th-year option declined because he's like just not a good player. He really needs to learn how to shoot it. Like, there's just no way around it. He needs to at least be able to knock down a catch and shoot jumper when he's wide open. And he can't do that right now. He is.
So so I wish we could do two things right now. I wish we could either put Trayvon Duvall's size and athleticism into Tremont Waters' body, or I wish we could put Tremont Waters' skill into Trayvon Duvall.
Yeah, and Waters is another.
If you do one of those two things, you'd have a great point guard.
Yep, and I don't know what to do with Waters, to be honest.
I love Waters.
He's been
too small.
Yeah, he's too small, but he's been slightly lesser Trae Young this year. You look at his numbers, he's averaging 18 and 6 while shooting 43% from three, and he's actually been more efficient than Trae Young.
But he's 5'9" and 150 pounds.
Right. He's a guy that I would be okay taking a second round flyer on, or maybe even a late first round pick on. I really liked Jawan Evans last year, and I don't know that there's a huge difference between.
He's nowhere near as big as Jawan Evans.
No, I know. That's what's crazy.
That's the problem with Tremont. But when you look at him play, he has every single skill level that you need in a point guard.
Yeah.
He can score at the basket. He can score mid-range. He's got a great jump shot. He can pass the ball. He gets great separation off the dribble, and he's fearless. And he defends.
Yep.
He does all of that stuff. But he's so small, and he's so slight. And it's not like Tyler Ulis small. Tyler Ulis is a lot stronger than he looks, right? And he's
feisty,
a lot more, too. And he's feisty, and he, Tyler Ulis, it's not Tyler Ulis small. We knew Tyler Ulis was small, but Tyler Ulis, he's just different. He just goes about his business different. Tremont Waters is small, and he plays small.
Yeah.
And, so but if he were 6'2", if he had Duvall's size, he'd be a top 10 pick.
Yeah, he would be.
And that's
if he had Trae Young's size, he might be a top 10, top 15 pick.
Yeah, you're right. And that's the thing. And so I wish we could just take his skill and put it in Trevon. Well, my rant is over.
But where would you take Trayvon right now? I honestly don't know. I think I'd take him at
probably, I wouldn't take him in the first round. You can't take anybody in these days that can't shoot.
Yeah. But
why do you think the Jazz are where they are with Ricky Rubio?
Yeah. Yeah, you might be right. He really might not be a first round pick. If this was a normal draft class in terms of depth, I think I would agree with you. But there hasn't been enough. Am I really going to take? I'm just kind of scrolling through my list right now.
Would you take Trevon over Lamar Peters right now?
Yes, I would. Because you look at what Lamar's done shooting the ball. He's been just as bad as Trayvon this year.
Yeah,
and he's way smaller. I don't really get I've never really understood the Lamar Peters thing, to be honest. He's fine. He can get separation really well. He's super, super competitive. Those are things I really like. He passes the ball well. I just don't know if he can. I don't think he's a great shooter, and I don't think he's a great finisher.
Yeah, the thing about Lamar, he had that great Adidas Nation. So
yeah,
but that says, okay, he can, when you're in a setting like that, you can rise and you can play really well.
Yeah.
Among the best of the best. And that probably bodes well for him.
Yeah.
But, at the same time, when you're Lamar Peters and you're 6 foot and 155, the scouts, they want to see you do it every single night.
Yeah.
And that's the thing.
The guy that I was hoping would be really good this year was Bryant Crawford at Wake. I've been super high on Crawford because he's very competitive. He occasionally knocks down shots. He hasn't really done that this year. He's a really good passer. He has the size. There's a lot to like about him. He just hasn't flipped that switch,
Yeah, I thought he was good. I never thought he was really that good. I think the guy that we got to look at is Jalen Brunson, and I think we got to put aside some of we got to put aside in our mind some of his limitations. Like, he's not really a great shooter.
Oh, I don't agree with that at all. I think he's a really good shooter.
I think that he knocks down shots. I think he's more scorer than shooter.
Yeah, I mean, here's what I will say about that. So he only takes like 3 threes a game because I agree with you. He doesn't always look for that 3-point shot. He has hit 38% through his first 2 years, and he's shooting 52% this year. Like, he is more scorer than shooter, but he can shoot it.
Right. I mean, and I agree with that. But I mean, if you look at some of his limitations, like, he's not super quick. You know, he's not vertical. He's not vertical at all.
Yeah.
You know, and you look at that and you think, okay, well, these are things that we have to ding him for. But here's the thing, like, when it comes to running a team, he's great at running a team. When he's a better version of Fred VanVleet to me.
Yes, I agree.
And like, just like in Fred VanVleet, you look at him and you look at the sum of his parts and you're like, well, how is he an NBA player? But then you look at Fred VanVleet on the floor, he's just an NBA player, like, he's just a basketball player.
It's feel.
And that's
it's all about feel.
Right, exactly. And that's how I look at Jalen Brunson. So, I mean, if you're looking for, you know, a third point guard in this class, he might be the one. He might be it.
Yeah.
Because he's just a basketball player. And, you know, and the other thing about it is he's a second-generation basketball player. Everybody had the same conversation about his father, and his father played 10 years in the league. Yeah. You know, and I think that that's the same thing with Jalen, man. I just think that he's just going to come in the league and he's just going to be a guy who could just play. Like, you know, he's not going to have an attribute that just super stands out. He's just going to be a player. He's just going to be a guy that can just go out there and hoop. And I think that that's what Jalen Brunson is.
So I just want to throw out.
If you're looking,
go ahead.
So if you're looking for a guy that you might want to pick in the 20s, I mean, that might be the guy if you're looking for a point guard.
So I just want to throw out, like, just the absurd numbers that Jalen Brunson is putting up this year. He's averaging 17 a game, 24 points per 40 minutes right now. He has a 73% true shooting percentage. He has a 72% effective field goal percentage. So forget the fact that he's a really good foul shot shooter. You take that out of the equation, he has a 72% effective field goal percentage. Honestly, I think that is the dumbest number I've ever heard. Like, my brain cannot comprehend how a guy that is 6'2" can have that kind of effective field goal percentage as such a high usage point guard. 29% assist rate to a 10% turnover rate. It's insane how good he is. It is crazy to me how good Jalen Brunson is. I agree. Like, I'll be honest, I probably will have him in in my top 30 when the year is over, just because I think he's a backup point guard. And if you look around the NBA, there aren't a ton of good backup point guards.
Right. And that's exactly where VanVleet has distinguished himself. Like, he's come in and you know, he's taken, you know, he did a year in the D League, you know, but he's taken everything that you know, Dwayne Casey has given him, and he's taken advantage of it. And I think that, you know, that's what Jalen Brunson is. And I think Jalen Brunson at the same stage is a better player than VanVleet.
I agree.
You know, so I think that that's where I would go if you're looking for that definitive third point guard, or if Bruce Brown is a point guard. You know, he could be your fourth point guard off the board.
Yeah, and like DeAnthony Melton throws this for a loop too, because, you know, we haven't seen him play yet this year, but like he's a guy that I really like. I like the fact that he plays both ends. I like the fact that he rebounds. He really competes defensively. The jump shot's the key, though. He needs to be able to shoot it. If you think Shake Milton's a point guard, I would have no problem having Shake Milton ahead of Jalen Brunson because I think he's a role player in the NBA just because of the jump shot.
Well, I like the kid. I like the kid from Wichita State.
Landry Shamet. Yeah, I think you could have Landry Shamet ahead of Brunson too, to be honest.
Yes, I really like him. I think he's coming. I think he's come to his own. He had 30 the other night.
Yeah,
he's a guy that's got some size. He's athletic, and he's another guy that's like really competitive as well. I really like him.
Yeah, and like if I was him, and well, like I don't know what's going to happen with that team this year. Like I think a lot of it will depend on if Greg stays or goes. Right, like if they get indications that Marshall's going to leave, maybe both him and McDuffie end up going to the NBA. But like, me and Shamet's a sophomore, Marcus McDuffie's a junior. Like, do they end up sticking around? Shamet's another guy, averaging 16 points a game, 73% true shooting percentage through 10 games this year. Just like the numbers that those two are putting up from a field perspective, from an efficiency perspective, are insane. I actually, now that you say that, now that you bring up Shamet, I would probably have Shamet just slightly ahead of Brunson just because I think the size translates a little bit better.
Yeah, the size definitely translates a little bit better.
Yeah. But you know what? Like you said, I will have Brunson certainly in my top 40, probably in my top 30.
Yeah, the guy can just play.
Yeah.
Like, and he's different. Like he's an old school guy. Like he's not going to go and dribble between his legs a million times. He's not going to try to put you on an and one videotape. He's just going he's just no frills, man. Like he just comes down and he just does his business, man. And he's a terrific pick and roll player.
Yep.
Terrific pick and roll player. And we still haven't talked about Mikal Bridges yet. I'm in love with him.
Let's talk about Mikal Bridges. Let's end it with Mikal Bridges. Mikal Bridges is awesome.
End it with Mikal Bridges. Mikal Bridges is awesome. The end. Draft him.
No, but seriously, guys that are 6'7" with 7'2" wingspans who, can really defend at a high level, can guard 1 through 4, can knock down threes at an absurdly high clip. He's just an awesome catch and shoot shooter. There's so much to like about what Mikal Bridges has done this year, and that's before even getting into the idea of him really improving his handle. He's a guy who can go around a screen now and pull up. He's a guy who can take mismatches into the post now. He's like, that was the thing that worried me coming into the year. He was always so robotic and so stiff with his movements, but now that he is a bigger opportunity, he's really improved with the way that he takes on those chances on the ball.
The thing about Mikal that I like the most is that when he was a freshman at Villanova, he was a non-shooter.
Yep.
Couldn't throw the ball in the ocean.
Yep.
And he couldn't put the ball on the floor more than once. He was just an athlete.
Yep.
That had some defensive upside. So if you look at him 2 years later from his freshman year and you look at his level of improvement, then you look 5 years down the road. Now I'm going to throw a name out here, and
let's see how crazy you're about to be
like. You're gonna be like, whoa, like holy crap, like whoa, slow down. But this guy came into college as a non-shooter, and another guy who couldn't put the ball on the floor more than once. Now, I'm not saying that Mikal is going to become this guy, but I'm saying that the similarities are there, and I'm talking about Kawhi Leonard.
I've heard it. I'll say it, like I've heard the comp. That's not like the first time I've heard someone say this.
I mean, if you look at how much he's improved from year 1 to year 3, and then you just look at where he could be at 25, 26 years old, if he improves at that rate, then, yeah, I'm like, okay.
I will say this. I think that Kawhi has a better frame. Like he's just naturally thicker and bigger. Mikal is, for his part, Mikal has really improved his body, but he's still just a naturally skinny person, right?
Yes.
Kawhi, I think, is just generally bigger, stronger, capable of taking physical contact on drives. Kawhi's hands, in his hand size,
right,
makes him a freak as a
separates him.
Yeah, as like a guy who can handle the ball, right?
Right.
To combine that ability to handle the ball with the ability to shoot it at a high level is what kind of differentiates Kawhi from
the other
Mikal.
thing is Kawhi got drafted by the Spurs.
Right, but like, you know what? Maybe Mikal gets drafted by an incredibly good organization too. Like if Mikal got drafted by Utah, for instance, the team that you cover, obviously, Quinn has done such incredible work with wings that, hey, why can't he become an all-star? I don't think that that's out of the question by any means.
Yeah, I'm just saying, man. Like I think that dude has a chance to. He's got a real chance to be really good.
Yeah, I agree. And that comes from someone who was not as high on him in the preseason. Like I had him as a first-round pick, to be sure, but I had him at like 20. Not like there were some people who had him in the lottery coming into the year, and I was not there. He is really, really improved this year, and I'm not like all in on him to the point where I have him at like 5 or 6, but like I think he's a top 10 guy. I'm with you.
Yeah, I do think he's a top 10 guy.
Yeah, you know, like the guy that, so like you would have him ahead of Kevin Knox is what you said earlier.
I'd have him ahead of Kevin Knox. So I'd have him I'd probably have him 8 on my board. I might have him 7 because I might sneak him ahead of Colin Sexton. So I think your Super Six are Doncic, Bagley, Porter, Bamba, Jackson, 8. Like those are your top 6, and I think that's going to be really tough for anybody to infiltrate. But like you're set. My 7th, I could go either Sexton or I could go Bridges.
Yeah, I think I'm right there with you. Tony, tell the people where they can find your work. Tell the people where they can find you online. Anything else that you want to plug, I give you the floor.
You can find me at TribJazz, TribJazz, or if you on Sundays when the Redskins are playing and Kirk Cousins goes an interception, you can find me at T Jones SL Trib, TJONES SLTRIB, because every Sunday when Kirk Cousins throws an interception, I start railing on him.
Oh no! Oh, I saw it. Saw it earlier today, and I was like, "Oh, geez, here he goes again, just destroying Kirk Cousins."
Here he goes again. I'm gonna do it until he takes that $20 million somewhere else.
Well, his main landing spot in San Francisco went away when they traded for Jimmy Garoppolo. So I don't know if you're going to get a chance there.
Shanahan, what are you doing, man?
I needed you to keep that spot open.
He's just trying to ruin your life, Tony. He's just trying to ruin your life. Oh, man. You can subscribe to the Game Theory Podcast on iTunes, SoundCloud, Google Play. I think we're on Spotify now. Please remember to do that. Please remember to leave us a 5-star rating and review. Those are always very nice. We'll be back later this week with some NBA draft stuff with Cole Zwicker. We'll be back later on. I think I do want to talk about Houston later on in the week because they're obviously doing some really interesting things with Chris Paul back. So until next time, we'll talk soon. Bye.